It is March 27, 1977. On the tranquil island of Tenerife, in the Canary Islands, two colossal Boeing 747s stand ready. KLM Flight 4805 and Pan Am Flight 1736, both diverted to Los Rodeos Airport after a bomb threat at their original destination, Las Palmas. What begins as an inconvenience quickly spirals into a desperate struggle against deteriorating weather and mounting pressure. The stage is set for an unimaginable tragedy, a chain of events triggered by a single misstep. Aboard KLM Flight 4805 sits Captain Jacob Veldhuizen van Zanten, a highly respected and experienced pilot. He is KLM's chief flight instructor, even featured in the airline's advertisements. His expertise is unquestioned, but today, pressure mounts. The diversion has caused significant delays, potentially impacting strict Dutch crew duty regulations. Captain Van Zanten is keen to depart, to avoid further schedule disruptions and the associated costs. This desire to expedite creates a subtle, yet powerful, pressure. Nearby, on Pan Am Flight 1736, Captain Victor Grubbs leads his crew. They are also veteran aviators, seasoned by years in the sky. Like KLM, they are eager to leave Los Rodeos and proceed to their original destination. The unexpected stopover is an inconvenience, delaying their passengers and their own schedules. Both crews are navigating a chaotic and overcrowded airport, an unfamiliar environment for these giant jets. The conditions are far from ideal, adding to the inherent risks. As the afternoon progresses, a dense, thick fog begins to envelop Los Rodeos Airport. Visibility rapidly deteriorates, dropping below safe limits for normal operations. The towering 747s, once clearly visible, now become indistinct silhouettes in the swirling mist. This sudden change in weather adds a critical layer of danger, making visual cues unreliable and forcing pilots and air traffic controllers to rely entirely on instruments and radio communication. The clock ticks, and the environment becomes increasingly treacherous. Los Rodeos Airport, typically a regional hub, is not designed to handle multiple Boeing 747s simultaneously. The diversion of flights from Las Palmas has transformed it into a scene of congested chaos. Huge aircraft jockey for position on taxiways and runways, with limited space and poor signage. The control tower, strained by the unusual traffic volume and adverse weather, struggles to maintain order. The stage is now set. Two massive aircraft, an unfamiliar airport, heavy fog, and increasing pressure on all involved. KLM Flight 4805 receives instructions from air traffic control. The controller clears the KLM jet to taxi down the runway, then take the third exit and prepare for takeoff. However, due to non-standard phraseology, a critical ambiguity emerges. The controller uses the phrase "cleared for takeoff" in a general sense, not as an explicit instruction to commence takeoff. KLM's Captain Van Zanten, under pressure, interprets this as a definitive clearance to begin his takeoff roll. Captain Van Zanten, believing he has full clearance, transmits, "We are now at takeoff." His first officer questions this, noting that ATC hasn't explicitly cleared them. But Van Zanten, seemingly driven by his previous misinterpretation and the urgent need to depart, dismisses these concerns. He begins to advance the throttles, initiating the takeoff roll in dense fog. The Pan Am 747 is still on the same runway, obscured from view. A catastrophic error in judgment unfolds. Air traffic control, hearing KLM's transmission, quickly responds. "Okay, stand by for takeoff." "I will call you," the controller transmits. This instruction is meant to clarify that KLM is not yet cleared for takeoff, but should merely hold position. However, the use of OK at the beginning, combined with the earlier ambiguous communication, adds to the confusion. This response, while intended to correct, fails to immediately and unequivocally stop the KLM crew from their accelerating path. Simultaneously, the Pan Am crew, still taxiing on the same runway in the blinding fog, hears the controller's "standby for takeoff" instruction. Realizing the danger, Pan Am's Captain Grubbs immediately transmits, "No, the Pan Am is still taxiing down the runway." This is a desperate attempt to alert both KLM and ATC to their presence. It is a critical warning, clearly stating that the runway is not clear. The situation is now incredibly volatile, with all parties operating on different assumptions. Tragically, as Pan Am transmits their urgent warning, the KLM cockpit radio is transmitting their own message. The simultaneous transmissions cause a high-pitched squeal, a phenomenon known as blocking in radio communication. Neither cockpit hears the other's critical message clearly. KLM's pilots receive only a partial, garbled sound, reinforcing their dangerous belief that the runway is clear. The thin thread of communication, already strained, snaps completely at this fatal moment. Unaware of the Pan Am 747 ahead, and with their own warning unheard by ATC, KLM Flight 4805 continues its acceleration down the runway. In the dense fog, visibility is zero. Captain Van Zanten pushes the throttles forward, completely committed to takeoff. Seconds later, the Pan Am crew, now seeing the approaching lights of KLM through the fog, desperately attempts to swerve off the runway. But it is too late. The two giants are on a direct collision course, a nightmare in the making. At 5:06 p.m., the inevitable happens. KLM Flight 4805, traveling at takeoff speed, slams into Pan Am Flight 1736. The impact is catastrophic, tearing both aircraft apart in a fiery explosion. Fuel tanks ignite instantly, sending enormous plumes of fire and smoke into the foggy sky. The sheer force of the collision leaves no doubt about the devastating scale of the accident. On the ground, rescue efforts are immediately hampered by the intense flames and the thick, suffocating fog. The Tenerife disaster becomes the deadliest accident in aviation history. All 248 passengers and crew on board KLM Flight 4805 perish. On Pan Am Flight 1736, 335 of the 396 occupants are killed. In total, 583 lives are lost that day. The scale of the tragedy sends shockwaves across the globe, forcing the aviation industry to confront the complex interplay of human error, communication failures, and environmental factors that led to such an immense loss. The quiet island is scarred forever. In the immediate aftermath, an intensive investigation begins, led by Spanish authorities with assistance from Dutch and American experts. Every detail is scrutinized: recorded cockpit conversations, ATC transmissions, weather conditions, and pilot procedures. The findings quickly point to a critical breakdown in communication. It becomes clear that a series of human errors, exacerbated by the challenging environment, culminated in the disaster. The world waits for answers, seeking to understand how such a tragedy could have occurred. One of the most profound changes implemented after Tenerife focused on language. Aviation authorities worldwide, recognizing the dangers of ambiguous communication, standardized critical ATC phraseology. The word takeoff would now only be used to explicitly clear an aircraft for takeoff. Phrases like "stand by for takeoff" were replaced with unambiguous instructions such as "position and hold." This eliminated confusion, ensuring pilots and controllers shared an exact understanding of instructions. Another vital precaution introduced was the mandatory readback of critical ATC instructions. Pilots are now required to repeat key clearances and instructions back to the controller. This simple but effective measure acts as a verification step, immediately catching any misunderstandings before they lead to dangerous actions. If the pilot's readback differs from the controller's instruction, a correction can be made instantly, preventing potentially fatal misinterpretations on the runway. The disaster also highlighted the need for improved airport infrastructure, especially at smaller airfields. Investments were made in advanced radar systems, allowing controllers to track aircraft more precisely, even in low visibility. Airport lighting and signage were enhanced, providing clearer visual cues for pilots taxiing in challenging conditions. These technological upgrades and physical improvements aim to reduce reliance on verbal communication alone, providing redundant safety layers for aircraft movement. The Tenerife disaster also led to a re-evaluation of pilot authority, particularly concerning takeoff decisions. Before 1977, a captain's word was almost absolute. Post-Tenerife, the culture shifted towards shared decision-making. Authority for immediate takeoff was reduced, making it clear that pilots must receive explicit, unambiguous clearance from ATC before advancing throttles. This change underscored the critical role of air traffic control in maintaining safe ground operations, especially in adverse conditions. Perhaps the most impactful change was the introduction of crew resource management, or CRM, training. This revolutionary approach emphasized teamwork, effective communication, and mutual monitoring within the cockpit. Pilots were trained to actively voice concerns, question instructions, and challenge perceived errors, regardless of rank. CRM transformed cockpit culture from a hierarchical structure to a collaborative one, fostering an environment where all crew members contributed to safety, preventing single points of failure. The Tenerife disaster stands as a harrowing lesson in aviation history. The collision, born from a confluence of human factors, communication breakdowns, and challenging conditions, forever altered how flights are managed. The precautions taken after March 27, 1977, were not merely incremental changes, they were systemic overhauls. Every safe flight today owes a debt to the 583 lives lost on that foggy runway. This tragedy serves as a constant reminder that clear communication and vigilance are paramount in the complex world of air travel.